Welcome everyone to this week's episode of Cloudy with a Chance of Insights, a bi-weekly podcast where we discuss all things relevant to the Microsoft Cloud that have occurred over the last month or so. And as I said, that's everything across the cloud. So it could be security, it could be infrastructure, it could be M365, etc. This week, we are going to have a look at some of the recent announcements that come out from Microsoft, including a response from CISA and Microsoft regarding the Exchange issue that they had a year or so ago, and some other interesting items from that period. We normally kick off with a little bit of a recap of what's been going on this week in terms of what we've been up to. From a personal perspective, this week has been a bit of a pain because I'm on annual leave coming up. So trying to fit everything in before I go on annual leave I've been basically heads down with a lot of admin and very unexciting activities this week, which I won't bore anybody with. I don't know whether David or Cyrus, you have anything that you might want to share at this juncture, but otherwise we can crack straight on with the main meat of everything.
I think, again, probably not interesting for most, but I'm in the process of getting back into exercise, which is in many ways very dull for people, but I really enjoy looking at all the data. So, I used to do a lot of running when I was a very young lad, and I didn't have any of this. I had like a watch. That was it, right? You had to guess everything else. And now I look at what's available. I'm training indoors on an indoor turbo trainer. I've got virtual rides that I can do. I've got power meters. I can see how much power I'm generating. And all it serves is to tell me how bad I am at the moment, which is quite disappointing.
Absolutely. I mean, the level of data that I think everybody has, which does remind me, so thank you for mentioning that, because I meant to charge this. So that is going to go over there so I can charge it.
Richard's waving around some form of watch, I think.
Yes, that was a smartwatch that is supposed to tell me, again, very much like you, David, about how well I'm doing, but actually it's almost the reverse. My health age is depressingly probably accurate. Cyrus.
No, about that topic, the smartwatch was my excuse to not do sport. I was like, I need a smartwatch to do sport. I need this stuff. Nah, it was an excuse for a long time. I started back a month ago, and it's really a pleasure. I feel better, and I saw that the friction point was I didn't want to go to a gym. I pay a subscription. I go 2-3 months, then I don't go. I feel frustrated. I feel guilty. So I bought some material that is not taking space, like a bench and some dumbbells. And that's it. You don't need more on a rope, and that is enough for the cardio. And so that was my way of starting back. And maybe today, because there's a big storm in the UK, so maybe we're going to lose internet connectivity. So it will be an interesting session today.
So it's amazing what they're doing now. So probably too much personal information for a podcast. Probably not good security practice. But my daughter works part-time in a local gym here. Yeah. And basically all the machines now are hooked up to some sort of smart device. So when you go and exercise on either like a cross trainer or something, that syncs the data to your smart device. If you go onto one of the weights machines, that does it as well. So you sort of end up with this sort of holistic picture of your workout. Now, I've not gone in and looked at any details, but apparently it provides a lot of insights around there. And I suppose if nothing else, it helps you track your routine that you've set up to do without having to, on my watch, you sort of have to go, individual activity, or what activity is it, that, and then sort of map it that way around. At least this is automatically done. It's a little bit scary. Excellent. Anyway, if you've got this far, then obviously you're appreciating our sort of off-topic conversation around exercise and smart devices. Please feel free to like, subscribe, ring the notification bell, etc., and we will continue. Now, this week, there's been a couple of announcements that I found particularly interesting. I'm going to cover one off now, which, as I think most of our audience are aware, Microsoft had a bit of an issue a year or so ago with their M365 or Exchange Online service in particular, where it was compromised allegedly by a foreign state actor. And that obviously caused a little bit of a sort of a kerfuffle and a rumpus about that, because potentially government, emails, etc., were accessed and information was potentially exfiltrated out. Now, Microsoft did publish a response at the time, but they've now come through with CISA and published a playbook around some expanded login that they have enabled within the M365 service. Now, this expanded login provides basically additional information around three main activities. So it provides access to information about who has read emails within the cloud environment, potentially who sent out emails, and people that have done sort of additional searches on content across the M365 estate, primarily focusing on things like Teams and SharePoint Online, etc., etc. Now, that information is available in the log format and can be exported to a SIM tool. Sentinel is obviously Microsoft's preferred choice on here, but they do offer the sort of native capability of putting it into Splunk as well, which is interesting. The playbook itself, I mean, it's a reasonably weighty document for, in effect, an extended or expanded login solution. It comes to about 60 pages in total. But it does provide a good sort of level of information about, obviously how to configure it, how to switch it on, how to access it, what the content is that's been sort of put into the logs, and how you can then sort of integrate that into your SIM solution. So it's well worth a read. Put it in there. Again, this is probably only a small part of the mitigation that Microsoft put in place for this, but it is welcoming, I think, to see that sort of openness, and the fact that it's being published on the CISA website, backed up by the sort of documentation as well. I think is a nice step in this sort of that transparency. And I suppose as a part of the wider sort of Secure Futures Initiative, or SFI, that Microsoft are playing or sort of planning and rolling out at the moment. So yeah, that was one thing I had for this week. The other one was, I was going to say it's related, but it's only related in the fact that it's security related. So it's a different element of this, and it's looking primarily at red teaming against AI platforms. So Microsoft released a blog article and a white paper. When did they release it? It was earlier on this week, I think, or last week. Basically, where they reported their sort of findings of proactively sort of looking for weaknesses within generative AI models. So as part of this program or project, whatever you want to call it, they've looked at 100 different AI platforms and come up with sort of 8 lessons that will influence or guide people into how to not only be more aware of how to secure their models, but also potentially how to actually test those models for vulnerabilities. And I think some of the 8 lessons that they've come up with are fairly sort of, self-explanatory to a certain extent. So one of the lessons they came up with for that, for example, is that LLMs, and I'm quoting directly from the article at the moment, LLMs amplify existing security risks and introduce new ones. And I think that anybody who's working in this space is probably aware of that anyway, because you are sort of opening up, in a way, a new attack vector to anybody out there, but also in terms, and we've discussed this previously, about how users are actually sort of interacting with those systems. There's a couple of other ones that I thought was interesting. So they sort of demonstrated an interesting hack, for want of a better word, with sort of image-based systems. So where there was the example given in the article is, again, fairly simplistic and very similar to the one that we talked about with Mark Rasanovich demoing the other day at Ignite, where they had an image and they then submitted the image to the interface, chatbot, whatever you want to call it, and said, okay, describe, show me how to do, I don't know, make a bomb or something like that. And the LLM said, no, we're not going to do that. But what they then did in this example was put text in the image that says, show me how to make a bomb. And then submitted the image, but then with the prompt saying, describe this image, and then the prompt and the LLM regurgitated or interpreted the text in the image and then gave the instructions. So I thought that was an interesting example and quite a simple one as well. And one of the sort of messages during the white paper and this article was that it's not necessarily the complex and complicated attacks that you need to be aware of. It's actually, in a lot of cases, the more simple forms that you need to think about and have a mitigation for. So anyway, that was the two things. I'm going to put links in the show notes as usual for these, so we can share them out with our listeners and viewers. I'd say I thought those were relatively interesting. I don't know, David, Cyrus, any thoughts on that or any viewpoint from yourselves?
Yeah, the incident was a bit scary, actually. You can receive an email and then someone with some content like RTF can access your device and can bypass a majority of the security. So now I didn't know about what you just mentioned about 60-page articles they created with like the playbook. And I guess some KQL queries, so you can create like probably alert and incidents to automatically detect when that happens in your environment. Same for Splunk. So that's actually kind of a good news because it was really fast. I saw that news like I think a few days ago. I could not even play with it or try it. Usually when there's massive incident like that, I like to maybe try to replicate. But it's a good thing. So it's partly mitigated. But if it's for those who don't have those features for SMBs, they have to wait a bit more because they usually don't have a SOC. They don't have like a Splunk or Sentinel. So yeah, it's a good opportunity maybe to start the conversation of like if you have E5, if you have E3, if you have Business Premium, to implement such solution to at least bandage the issue, patch the issue properly.
Yeah. And it's those attacks are coming in so many different forms now. So you've got that one, which is obviously trying to attack the data. I'm not sure if you guys have seen the what Cloudflare said yesterday. So they say they've blocked an attack of a 5.6 TBPS, so it's terabytes, or is it more? Petabyte. Anyway, DDoS attack. So it came from a botnet, circa 13,000 IPs, lasted 80 seconds, and they managed to mitigate that. And that's a ridiculous amount of data. And I think Microsoft claimed the previous one in terms of being fend off DDoS attacks. But those are becoming even more pervasive now, aren't they? And people are just finding different vectors to try and attack these large cloud providers. Some for fun, some for intent, I guess. And they're saying a lot of it comes from older sort of routers that are compromised and this, that, and the other. So I think when people talk about, I still want to keep Windows XP, there's quite a good reason why those technologies shouldn't be used anymore, right? Or even dare I say Windows 10 now, as much as I hate to say it, because those will be used to others' advantages to try and break into these large cloud providers, because there's such a concentration risk now, isn't there, Richard, in terms of these providers? I think in many ways, it's really good that Oracle's come to the fore with their cloud service, because at least we've got, another provider that people can sort of spread load and spread risk on. I wonder if I'm quite a tangent there, didn't I? I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. And I quickly found the article that you were referring to, hence the quick look down. Yeah, and so Cloudflare says it blocked a 5.6 terabit DDoS attack, which included 13,000 IPs and lasted roughly 80 seconds.
Crazy.
And the attack came from a Mirai, I'm probably not pronouncing that correctly, botnet. So again, there's the world's largest. The second largest was 3.8, which was in October last year, apparently.
That's the one I remember. Yeah, the Microsoft one. Yeah.
But yeah, it's I'm obviously biased, and I think Cyrus would probably say the same thing as well, because we've both got an interest in in cybersecurity, but it is one of the areas I think where we're going to see a rapid change or evolution around how this is going to look in the future. I mean, not just things like, obviously quantum safe we talked about in the last episode. That's obviously a big moving area. AI, the security for AI and AI for security, so that the two flavors of the AI piece in security again is opening a lot of avenues for both sides of the fence. From a proactive, a good way and in a negative way. So I think it's a very interesting field. Unfortunately, as we all know, and is constantly publicised, there's the extreme lack of people within the cybersecurity realm. I think last time I looked at it was like 600,000, people shortage or something in that area. Some organisations are actively trying to do something about that. I think IBM have got a free sort of learning course for people to get into cybersecurity, and I wouldn't be surprised if other providers are not doing something similar. I will try and find a link to that for anybody that's interested. It's an area that is constantly moving, constantly updating, and you're always coming across something new.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's a bit expensive to defend. If you look the price, for example, you have a website on Azure, you have front door. The basic SKU offer you basic DDoS protection. But from what David mentioned, this is not protecting that because it's normal device, compromised device. So they assumed, okay, even if you have zero trust network. And the DDoS protection, the premium one, in like any companies, I know Azure better, they're a bit expensive for all the workloads. So sometimes you defend a part of your business, but the one that is attacked is a different part of your business because they take time before attacking. And a lot of more and more people have access to the optical fiber. So any random device throughout the world can suddenly wake up and attack. So indeed, Richard, AI and all these little new feature that comes can solve. It depends on how the business model will be. Because if it's as expensive as today for the majority of the company and SMBs, they will not activate. They will assume the risk.
Yeah, and I think it'd be interesting to. I don't think I've quite got to grip with this myself, but obviously, similar to Cloudflare, right? There's an extent of DDoS that Azure as a service mitigates against, and then you're going to be running your own DDoS protection on your architecture. So, at what point does the Azure one, the platform one, step in versus the one that you have? And I don't think I've got a good grip on that. That might be worth something sort of digging into down the road and maybe sharing back, because knowing at what point that big brother protection, for want of a better phrase, kicks in, I'm quite interested in that, actually.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because I'm going to have to go back and have a quick look. So obviously within an Azure subscription itself, you've got the DDoS protection that you can use as a service. And there's two flavors of that within the Azure piece. So you've got the plan 1 or plan 2 or whatever it's called, or basic and advanced, or whatever terminology they've applied for that. But I would assume that there's one also at the fabric layer.
Yeah, for sure.
You would think, wouldn't you? And certainly I remember, and I suspect, David, you might have had something similar as well, when we were doing sort of M365 migrations, so especially sort of SharePoint Online or large Exchange migrations, you had to be very careful. And a lot of the tools actually built something in place like Metalogix and Quest, etc., so that Microsoft didn't perceive that sort of large migration as a DDoS attack and then started to throttle the traffic down, which was actually quite a common scenario. You'd go from, I'm going to make up the numbers now here, 100 meg transfer, a minute or whatever it would be, and then suddenly it would drop right down to 10 or something. And it's because somebody at the Microsoft data center or something at the Microsoft data center had gone and then just throttled that traffic back. And I certainly had instances in the early days where the connection was basically killed, and they would say, right, you're not accessing those those APIs or that from those sources anymore. So what I used to actually recommend that when we were doing a migration, again, this is going back 10 years or so I don't think you need to worry about it anymore. and to actually go and speak to your Microsoft account team and say, by the way, we are going to be doing a migration project for the next 3 months. Please, can we just make sure we liaise with all the relevant teams to ensure that is not impacting other people, but also isn't being unduly throttled. Which, again, I'm going off on massive tangents today, so apologies to anybody who's
good conversation though. Good conversation. Just proves we're not scripted, doesn't it, Richard?
Yeah, it does show that we're not scripted. And I think that's obvious. Anybody who's watched any of these knows that we do not script these. And by the way, I don't cut anything either. So when we do the editing, all I might do is might trim the beginning and I might trim the end, but everything else in the middle is just left as it is. So you're seeing this warts and all, or listening to this warts and all, depending on the platform. But I remember doing a pen test about 5 or 6 years ago against Azure. And that caused problems because we were deliberately, obviously, trying to break the application that was sat in Azure. And we ended up having some interesting conversations with Microsoft off the back of that, with the basic advice afterwards. And I don't know if this is still relevant, because it's not really an area I've looked into, which basically tell us before you start.
It's in the terms of service
doing these things.
Actually, Richard. Yeah.
You can't do that.
Yeah, it's in the terms of service. You have to work with them.
Anyway, those were the two things I had for this week. I will pass it across to David next.
Oh,
you knew I was going to pick you, didn't you?
So there was one thing that caught my eye today, and before I start, I'd like to say Bore da, everyone, and that's Welsh for good morning, if you didn't know. So I'm Welsh of origin, and I like to shoehorn it in wherever I can. Now, I think what I wanted to talk about, I saw a blog post about Azure storage, actually, and it was a little bit about sort of the past, the present, and what the future holds. And it was a fairly simple article, so kind of targeted at anyone really, whether you're an IT admin, developer, or enthusiast. And the blog really spanned, where we think the technology is going in the concept of AI, and it then links out to a Ignite session that I'd missed, and I'd missed it because it was one of the breakout sessions. So I don't know how many of the breakout sessions you've seen, but with Ignite, obviously there are a bunch of sort of primary plenary sessions, and then there were many breakout sessions, and this was one of those breakout sessions talking about storage. And the thing that really interested me was the capability that they're talking about bringing into Azure now. So this isn't even in private preview yet, this capability, very, very early doors that they were demonstrating. But they were essentially demonstrating the capability to connect to on-premises data through a virtual storage account. I was like, ooh, that's quite interesting. So what it does is that in the Azure portal, you can go into your storage account, you can say, okay, I want to connect to a blob or some sort of storage. And the screen then takes you to, okay, do you want to connect to a NetApp file system on premises? I was like, that's cool. Do you want to connect to Dell storage on premises? Do you want to connect to Azure Files? Do you want to connect to this? Do you want to connect to that? And they're obviously going to grow that capability in the future, but it creates a virtual representation of that in the Azure platform. So all your data is still on premises, but it's giving you that virtual representation so you can look at it and then do inference over it, which is really, really interesting. And I've not quite got to grips in terms of, is it just a connection to that data, which I'm assuming is, but as opposed to caching it or copying it, if you see what I'm saying, which you can obviously do with Azure Data Factory and Cosmos and other things. But it was ridiculously easy to be able to surface that data into storage, which you could then surface into Azure AI Search, which you could then use in chat And that was the demo they did. They were trying to find out the secret ingredient for pizza somewhere. I can't remember where the pizza was, but somewhere in the US. And to begin with, they asked the Azure AI Studio, "What's the secret ingredient?" Goes, "These documents talk about the secret ingredient, but it doesn't actually explicitly say it." The chap then connected onto on-premises data, and there were like 4 or 5 different PDF files that he connected to. Went back to Azure AI Search, did the query again, and then it popped out. It was spelt or something. I can't remember what it was, but really, really quick. And the whole ease of use and the whole experience of that, I think, is going to be a bit of a game changer. Really, once it eventually gets out, I mean, it's obviously a long way to go if it's not even in private preview yet. But I think that sort of capability, again, and I know I keep banging on about this, is really recognizing how much data still and will exist on premises. And it's nice to see that there's continued effort to support those modalities. I forgot to say, it also connects to S3 as well, so it'll connect to other cloud providers also. So that really caught my eye, and I thought it was interesting. I've probably done a really poor job of explaining it, and we'll give you the links. But I was fascinated.
Did you watch the LinkedIn live session with Satya and David Schwimmer from LSEG or London Stock Exchange?
Am I allowed to say yes but no? Because I was in meetings and I was trying to listen to it and I didn't. So I had it on, but I didn't absorb it.
I didn't have the excuse of being in meetings. I had the excuse of trying to multitask, and I'm not particularly brilliant at multitasking. But there was a section in that, and I'm going to have to go back and listen to it in a little bit more detail, where the chap from LSEG was basically talking about that, because what they've got, obviously, from their side is a lot of sort of disparate data dotted around different systems in different environments. And one of the things that they're looking at using the sort of AI interface for, and Satya did his whole, this is going to be the new interface for AI, piece, is that they're using that sort of as a way of amalgamating the data from all these various different data sources that they have. Which sounds very similar, or at least sounds like it's going to sort of plug in quite nicely with what you just described. And again, I thought the LinkedIn live session was interesting. Again, this is my cynical hat on, not that I'm wearing a hat for anybody who's listening.
But you are cynical.
Yeah, but I am cynical. Is that this is a LinkedIn live session? So LinkedIn live with a moderator from LinkedIn, which is obviously Microsoft owned. Yeah. LSEG, Microsoft has a minority stake in LSEG. I think it's 5%. And Satya, who obviously is the CEO, whatever, of Microsoft. So basically, it was just a free advert for Microsoft for half an hour. So I'm not quite sure how it got through the, the sort of our marketing sort of guys, or from a legal perspective. But yeah, it was basically just a free advert for 30 minutes while they were talking about how great Microsoft and some of the AI components were. And on a completely separate note, I've never really noticed this on a LinkedIn live session before, perhaps because I don't go on that many, but the sort of chat window was basically just people advertising their services, which was
I saw that. Connect with me, or if you want to do this, call me.
Yeah, it's like, looking for developers, come and contact us, or we've got a remote work, what's the thing, job share or whatever it's called, where you sort of work from home. All that was all like adverts on the right hand side for people. Obviously, enterprising, you can't knock them for it, but it wasn't. I don't know if I'd never noticed that before. It's probably been there all the time, but yeah. Cyrus, again, enough of my waffling. Let's get on to some more useful information.
I'll be very short. And so on my side, I will continue the conversation we had started for the previous recording. It was a question asked, what is cloud native? And maybe I can just do the opposite question. What is not cloud native? So the mindset of migrating to the cloud often comes from, we have a end of a contract, we need a colocation data center. We don't want any more data center for different compliance legal reason. And then we start a migration of some workload to the cloud. Or eventually, if we're small companies, we can even afford to completely cut the Active Directory and migrate to the cloud. So basically, most of the time is a lift and shift. but that is not cloud native, and you don't get most of the cloud. We hear a lot of people saying that. We say that too, and the costs go high because you can't think in the cloud the same way you think in the when you own your own infrastructure and you pay only for the electricity on your workforce. So cloud native is an interesting thing because we talk about that, but often I feel we don't dive deep on. Even for me, I used to just repeat what I was learning on my career and saying like, oh yeah, you need cloud native and stuff. But when you have clients and you have people that are really willing to play the game and say, okay, that's what is cloud native? How can we have the most of that? And then you have like few words, and I'm going to share 3, like scalable, when you grow and shrink based on demand. You have resilience, like when they can handle failure gracefully, and that is a key for the next subject that are coming. Portable, you can put all your whatever program, whatever service you want to offer, or in different environments. Like it can be like you are on Azure, you can tomorrow be on AWS, have multi-cloud, on-premise, etc. If you still have on-premise, and that is the subject going to deeper to what is cloud native. We often talk about microservices. It's not only that, but the mindset of microservices is often associated with containerization. And so that you can imagine as Lego blocks. This is the example we usually give, and I think there's no better one. And each piece of the Lego can do specific things. And for example, you have your in your on-premise, you have like a financial app, but you can break down the financial app for different things. For example, for HR, for your providers, etc. And you can narrow down and just give small services that are independent, more agile. You can develop independently all these microservices, or if one fail, doesn't break the whole thing. So why I'm talking about that, there's this group we mentioned last time, CNCF, Cloud Native Computing Foundation. Basically, it's the child of Google on the Linux Foundation. It was created to create Kubernetes. So Kubernetes was initially developed by Google engineers, and they offered that to the public. Basically, they made it open source, and this Linux Foundation and Google together, they created this foundation to rethink the way they develop this kind of cloud native stuff. And everyone contributed. Amazon, and one of the biggest contributor for Kubernetes is actually Microsoft, which entered in 2015. There was plenty of news, if you remember, but Microsoft loved Linux, and people laughed. You also Linus Torvald was saying like, actually, I think it was him or someone else who came on stage, and people said, no, you can't betray us. It's Microsoft. It's our arch enemy. And that's when like Microsoft started his journey to like being more doing Linux and Red Hat, etc. I can see I'm starting to talk a lot, so I'm going to go to the point. It's a big digression to talk about this project that I was really enthusiastic, and I started to talk about it like weeks ago. So Microsoft is a big player into this cloud native foundation, and there's plenty of projects. And how it works, you have 3 stages. You have sandbox is when you have like ideas that are accepted, approved, and you have a budget and you do some experimentation. So this is a sandbox in CNCF, and you have plenty. And doesn't mean that they will continue, but they receive some investment, and you require the community, the broader community, even your competitors, to come and test your idea and your project. Second stage, the most interesting one is the incubating, is when you receive more funding, you receive more, you have the trust of the community, and then it's in active development, not only by your company, it's your idea, but then it's belonging to the broader community. So that is the most interesting part. And then you are graduated. Graduated is when you finished, is when your project is not a project anymore. There's a proven track record of revenue generation or value added for many companies. So there is a project that comes from Mark Rusinovich. I hope I said the name correctly this time. The CTO of Azure. And he basically, I trust this guy, honestly, for all the project he's done. And the project is called Hyperlight. And if you just Google or YouTube Hyperlight, for whoever is listening to the podcast, he talked about that in 2023 a bit. There was not much code. And but there was not really a receptive audience. And to be fair, I didn't know the product until like a few weeks ago. And recently in November, during Ignite, actually, there was a small audience and he was talking about that with more example. It's a 40-minute session, but you have a 3-4 minutes about that topic itself. What is Hyperlight? So basically, before I dive deep, Hyperlight is now in the sandbox mode in the CNCF. So it's Microsoft creation, Microsoft contribution. And for me, it's going to be for probably the future Kubernetes, the same impact. It's not as powerful, but I'm going to explain what it is. So it's called a virtual machine manager. So doesn't mean anything. You create micro VMs. So we know containers. Containers basically, long story short, is you create a small environment with all the requirement for an application. So you have a small app and you create these small containers which share the hypervisor resources, and you just share what you need for this particular app. The micro VM is a bit different, and the use case is, for example, when you have like what we call, I forgot the name, is a multi-tenancy. Beg your pardon, and don't cut that. So it's it's always me trying to find my words. Is toxic? Is hostile multi-tenancy. So hostile multi-tenancy, for example, your government, you are a bank, or you have like a lot of public going through your app, and you can't afford buffer overflows, or you can't afford someone using the same tenant and doing lateral movement to see different data. In France, we had that, for example, with some, you could edit the in the browser, in the equivalent of NHS, and you could see different people address, different people's personal data, because they use this powerful app online, but by changing some variables, you could access legitimately to different apps. But to mitigate that, sometimes in the cloud native, you use serverless or edge application. And I will not talk about edge now in the next session, but serverless, for example, instead of having VM running all the time, you have a function that sleeps and wait for input. A way to fix this problem, you create what we call micro VMs. And until now, it was not efficient to create a VM per request, because it was, the minimum was containers, and you had like, for example, 200 milliseconds per request. Sounds nothing for people who don't really know what is infrastructure, but if you have like 100,000 people doing 200 milliseconds, it's a lot of resource, and it's costly, and it's not green IT, it's not polluted, etc. What the virtual machine does, this micro virtual machine does, is in 2 milliseconds, you can create within the function, you can create this kind of small temporary micro VMs that execute the function and avoid any kind of leakage. It's built in Rust, so it's not C++. Again, I will try to not digress, but there's a big debate, C++, Rust. So long story short, I'm making short, C++ is probably after machine language, which is assembly or 1.0, the actual machine language, is one of the most efficient, fast, and used to be secure language, but it's not as secure. And there is a debate. I want to cut the debate quickly. Why Rust, which is a new language to avoid kind of managing the memory of a language, Rust is more secure because you don't manage the memory. You don't have the garbage collector. Why? Because there's no garbage to collect. There's no garbage to manage. So Rust is the language that is chosen for that thing. We can digress into that later. But basically, you don't have buffer overflows. You don't have the developers having to actively manage the memories or this kind of security potential breach. It's a shift left mindset, and you basically develop, and you don't have to care about any security incident because you will avoid 90% of the problems. Yeah. So I encourage the audience to just, I'm going to stop now. There's more to say, but I go to see the examples. They use a stupid example of image generation, creating thumbnails. And you can see actually that you're completely isolated with few lines of code because you haven't Rust. Easy.
Yeah, it's very cool. And I was going to say, you may have spotted it, Cyrus, but they've been rewriting most of the Windows kernel, well, Windows, I think they call it Windows Core now, don't they, into Rust for those exact reasons. Yeah.
It was interesting you said that C++ was more secure. It does depend on who wrote the C++ code.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Going back to my first job, my first paid job anyway, was as a C++ developer. And I'm not sure that I would class some of my code as being very secure, especially not in C++. As soon as I got my hands on Visual Basic, I was like, great, because this writes half my code for me. I don't have to worry about writing mouse routines and drawing elements on screens and all that sort of weird and wonderful things that I had to do with C++. Obviously, you put them in modules and import the modules in and reuse them that way around. But yeah, you get the gist.
No, you're completely correct. And when I finished school, actually, it was still C++, the go-to language for, we talk about plain. You say you don't develop application for plain in Java or .NET. You use C or you use C++. The security was actually safety because you use that in like a mission critical stuff. But again, as you said, managing the memory, trusting the developer is too dangerous. And Rust remove all these kind of, there's no garbage collector because they trust the language. There's no garbage. You don't generate garbage. And I said that because people are sensitive. If you check online on Reddit, they're really sensitive to C++. No, I learned that for 40 years and it still works. They will say it's used by video games industry, it's used by healthcare, it's used by military. So they're really sensitive. And actually it's true because you have plenty of new language at start, there's a hype, there's budget, and they die. And we don't know if Rust will stay, but for now it works as fast, sometimes faster, and secure native. Sorry, I don't want to digress more, but we're on the same page.
Good one. Thank you, Cyrus.
Excellent. I'm conscious that we have, as usual, overrun. So on that note, I will wish everybody a happy day, night, evening, whatever it is that you're watching or listening to this, and we will see you on the next episode.
Great stuff. Thanks, guys.